Our next presentation is from Habibul Khondker, and I hear that his presentation I have to share, I think. Have you got his presentation or shall I share?
I can share it.
Okay, that will be good. Let me introduce you. Professor Khondker Habibul is a professor of social science at Zayed University, United Arab Emirates, and a co-chair of RC9, Social Transformation and Sociology of Development, ISA. He is a co-author with Brian Turner, Globalization East, and he co-authored Asia, Europe in Globalization. So many books he has written, and this year his areas of focus is globalization. So he's an expert in that area. So I would like to thank you, Professor Khondker Habibul Haq, and would like to request you to deliver your presentation. Over to you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's very early morning in Abu Dhabi, and thank you for having me on this very important conference. This is my first time I'm in APSA. I've always been interested in taking part, and finally it has worked. So I really want to thank the organizers for having me on board. So the paper that I have, and as I look at the watch, don't have much time. I call it, how does sociology as a discipline, or how do sociologists look at and have addressed this pandemic? So that's the main question that I have raised here. And then towards the end, I argue that sociology has to expand its horizon to include humanity, and it kind of dovetails with what Michael Buroway just said, that he also used that word humanity. It also came out in the president's remark, President Yap's remark. So, we can define virus in various ways, but this is a very unique virus. I looked at some historical precedents, and there's a new book called Apollo's Arrow, where it has been discussed quite extensively, the history of past pandemics and why this particular pandemic is so unique. And now, as you can see, the consensus is building that this pandemic is going to transform itself into an endemic, and we have to live with it. I mean, this is the latest scientific consensus that I have seen. So we're not going to overcome it the way, in the past pandemics have been overcome. This would be more like an influenza. This would stay with us. And it kind of makes scientists somewhat humbler, that we really don't know what's going on. I mean, that's another consensus. So in that context, how can sociologists play a role? What is their role? We tried to do this book, it has just come out this year, where we included like 20 plus countries and what's going on in different countries. Mostly sociologists were invited, and we did a rather comprehensive work. But this is like the pandemic is a work in progress. So we had to stop at a certain point, and we didn't quite cover the vaccine issue that was presented by Professor Hosada. So this is a work in progress. We really need to continue our work. And when we look at sociology, I would say that there are a number of reasons why sociologists, I put it 3 reasons, but there could be more, that sociology presents with, it has an inbuilt holistic view or approach to society. And I think that's quite handy when it comes to a complex crisis like pandemic, because there's so many aspects to it. And therefore, sociology, my professor in Pittsburgh defined it as a science without a portfolio. So it really doesn't have a very specific territory to look at. So we can expand our horizon beyond the limited scope or the defined scope. We can go beyond that. This is what our discipline allows us to do. And there are certain subfields in sociology that are like disaster sociology, sociology of health, sociology of public health. I mean, they come very handy in dealing with, research on pandemic. And finally, a group of social theorists, most notably Ulrich Beck, decades ago talked about risk society and how modern society, how modernity, or what he calls second modernity, the reflexive modernity, has a tendency to produce crisis. So, I mean, these are to our advantage as a discipline. And then, of course, Michael Burrow mentioned, and Calhoun wrote some time ago, that we can bring in the insights of all the classical sociologists, including Burrow, that Michael pointed out. And then we can see, some of these social aspects like trust and social capital. We could exchange social capital with social resilience, as it came out in Professor Imtiaz's talk, that these things are extremely important, and we can judge their importance in times of crisis like pandemic. That if a society is equipped with social capital and trust, then it has a better chance of survival compared to societies, individualistic societies that we have seen in Europe and in America and in various other places, that how they're coping, in the midst of COVID crisis, they're debating about vaccine mandate and so on. So we can see the role of social capital, and that's where sociologists can play an important role. And of course, as sociology moves on, we also have to pay attention to this trespassing of social sciences. And some of the recent works that I've looked at, especially Mariana Mazzucato and several others, who are focusing on a complete rethink of capitalism, the rethink of various interlinked crises, how economic crisis is intrinsically connected with climate crisis and how they're connected with pandemics. And this may not be the last pandemic that we are going to face. This is a dire prediction, but I go with that. But then again, sociologists were not completely absent from the discussion. I found out that in 2019, Oxford Handbook of Global Studies, there was an essay on pandemics by a sociologist, Jacobson, based in Washington now. So we are not completely out of the radar. Sociologists have been involved, and when we look at, following Burway's recommendation and others, that sociology has certain advantages in terms of, our rethinking our discipline and returning to our classics. Auguste Comte and Kant, and in fact, Adam Smith, who can also be counted as one of the early sociologists, they all talked about not humanity in a direct sense, but Adam Smith had great things to say about altruism, about social responsibility. So we can return to our classical heritage and redefine sociology, not simply to look at national society. We have to broaden our approach to global society or humanity, because this is the term that is being frequently used in different discussions. And here I have a couple of references, not a comprehensive list of citations and references, but I'll be happy to answer more questions if I receive any. And I want to thank you for the time given to me. Thank you very much. Back to Zakia, please.